I bet he's thinking about other women. What if the atomic bomb had not been used? I do literally have these exact moments in my own life, just laying awake at night in a cold sweat. There's just so many ways you can take this phrasing. I mean, I think immediately my mind goes to Japan and what if we didn't drop anything on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? But then I also think in a weird way how that would affect the Cold War. Like, what if we didn't get the opportunity to study the human impact that the bombs had? We knew physically what it did, but not the horrors that would follow dropping it on an actual city. I have to think that made both sides, the US and the USSR, far more hesitant to use it during the Cold War. I'm really wondering if this destiny just gets pushed over to the Korean Peninsula instead of Japan. Does the US end up listening to Douglas MacArthur during this war and just make this a sea of irradiated nuclear coal bait? On a completely different note though, what happens to Japan during the Cold War if they don't surrender to us? What if they end up holding out and the Soviet Union gets to those islands first? I can see it being very possible that we end up in a universe with a communist Japan, or at least a couple of the islands are split between like a north and south, like Korean Peninsula sort of situation. Now the person that actually posted the meme itself just talks about how long the war would have lasted. So there's just so many questions you can ask yourself with this. There's also a whole nother conversation to be had about Operation Downfall, which is where we actually land American boots on the ground in these Japanese islands, and the countless lives that would cost on both sides here. Yeah, my mind is just racing. 19th century proposals for a Jewish homeland be like, I'm pretty sure they did actually suggest Bikini Bottom, or essentially the same thing, close enough to that. Now, the concept of establishing a Jewish nation had been around for a long time, and the ideas were pretty wild. Now, not all of them were in fact islands, of course, but a very famous one was Madagascar. There's also this part in the Dominican Republic. Guyana could have been maybe nice, could have been posted up with like waterfalls and stuff. There's also the idea of just making Albania a Jewish state. In a couple spots in China and Japan, there was already a Jewish oblast in Russia. It's not like every single one of these proposals were like tropical island paradises, but they definitely could have been. There was a couple in there, which with hindsight being 2020, I don't know if I should say this. I mean, I'm just saying if I was in it, let's just move on. Doesn't it sound nice to live on an island? That's all I'm saying. Was the proposal for them to live in a pineapple under the sea? Madagascar, actually. Important thing to note though, this plan was made by the No-No Germans, so kind of a strange thing to yeah. Wasn't there a proposal that was a random US state, like Michigan or something? Alaska is the most common one. Alright, if I was trying to live in Israel, like, damn, I don't know if I'd want Alaska. The Muslims promised 70 fair women in heaven, said by Vladimir the Great. Yeah, but no alcohol, bro. What? Oh my god. There he is drinking. Dang, that's a hard choice. I'm not even talking for Vlad here, I'm talking for myself. What do you want? So Vladimir the Great was Prince of Novgorod and then later the Grand Prince of Kiev. The Eastern Orthodox Church later canonized him as Saint Vladimir, but before that he considered converting from paganism to Islam. He sent envoys to study Islam, but after learning that Islam forbids alcohol and pork, he got baptized himself and baptized Kiev and Rus. Oh, the and pork thing is maybe key too. I do like bacon. Sounds like this wasn't necessarily part of the equation, but still quite the interesting hypothetical question. I don't know, man. 70 women. That's a lot. That's scary. No alcohol? It'd be hard to deal with all 70 without. Drinking, said he, is the joy of Russes. We cannot exist without that pleasure. Wow. The forwardness of it all is amazing. American woman tears down Greek flags, mistaking them for Israeli. Westerners are angry about what's happening in the Levant and accidentally attacked the Greeks. Meanwhile, this guy with the calendar change. It's 1204 all over again. Good moment to say history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. In this context, the year 1204 refers to the Fourth Crusade. If you know anything about the Fourth Crusade, it was an absolute disaster. Basically solidified the West and East schism and ended up leading to the downfall of the Byzantine Empire. Anyways, this current event is not going to help us Americans beat the bad at geography allegations. In fact, I don't even think they're allegations anymore. They're basically confirmed, and they've been like that for like decades now. Meanwhile, the region known as the Balkans in Europe, if for whatever reason the Ottoman Empire never existed. I know this region really despises the Ottoman Empire and everything, but I mean, come on. Really? Do we really think the Balkans would be like this? Would it even be incrementally better? I feel like a great historical example of this is basically the Balkan Wars. I mean, the first Balkan War was against the Ottomans, yes, but then a second one popped up a year later after the Ottomans were already kicked out. Yeah, I don't know. Something tells me even without the Ottomans, there would still end up being quite a lot of chaos here. So without the Ottomans, there would be no humans. You see that, kid? Not one city in sight. In reality, the Balkan people have just bumped each other into extinction. Yeah, I don't know about this. Ticus. Everyone arguing if the Maginot Line worked or not. Meanwhile, in Czechoslovakia, nobody will know if your fortification worked or not if you just never even used it at all. That's definitely one way to get around the controversy. They didn't have to use fortifications because they kind of just got eaten without any resistance. But apparently the Czech tanks at this time were actually really good. You make it sound like the Czechs consented to being circumcised. We did. Why we did it though, that's a whole different story. It said that Newton, upon reflection of his financial misadventure, woefully remarked, "I can calculate the movement of stars, but not the madness of men." As Newton re-examines his investments, puts money in, exits happily. Newton's friend gets rich here though, so Newton re-enters. Meanwhile, Newton, forced to exit, broke, and well, yeah, by losing all his gangs from the initial part. If Newton can't do it, I have no chance. I don't know why people day trade. Ah yes, the famous South Seas bubble, the biggest market crash in modern economic history. They invented credit default swaps during this bubble. Enough with the zodiac signs. Which Knight Order are you supporting? Dang, I don't want to pronounce that first one. But then the St. John Hospitallers, the Templars, St. James of the Sword. Finally, the Teutonic Knights. Man, the choices. I'll be honest, I'm probably picking the Teutonic Knights just because I feel like I'm most familiar with them. This is the ultimate choose your fighter. The Hospitallers, for sure, they survive. Am I pronouncing that wrong? They survive to this day in a small capacity, plus they're famous for being the Knights of Malta. Oh, that's the Knights of Malta. They're even recognized by the UN. Nowadays, their role is largely just focused on providing humanitarian assistance. Don't forget, I also love this map of their colonial holdings back in the 1600s. There was a Knights of Malta colonial empire for a second there. I mean, empire's debatable, but it was, yeah. Inside neutral Switzerland, there are two wolves. On one side, labor camps for Allied pilots. On the other, warm baths and a full meal for no German pilots. I mean, not to say that was okay, but did you see their situation? They were literally surrounded on all sides. I'm not surprised that they were going to be a little bit less neutral with the side that was on all of their borders. Well, I mean, when you're surrounded by no Germans, you'd have to keep them happy. Hello, I like money, says Switzerland. Yeah, let's not even get to the gold situation. To justify their actions, French leaders of the Crusade claimed that they were taking their revenge against the Greeks for the fall of their ancient Trojan homeland. This is for Troy. What? So what did we do to you? Again, like we talked about earlier, that Fourth Crusade was an absolute mess. They didn't care about the Muslims. They were just trying to get their revenge for Troy. A little thing called the Sack of Troy, maybe you've heard of it. Least distracted crusaders. Meanwhile, World War I generals, after gaining 12.6 meters of land, over 100,000 are dead within one single battle. Worth it! I gained 12 whole meters and I only had to sacrifice 150,000 lives? That's a great deal, at least considering World War I standards. Oh, well that I didn't consider that. Gargantuan efforts to move their drink cabinets 6 inches to the other side. True that World War I did not just happen in Western Europe. That is mainly just the Western Front. Of course, in English memes, that's what we're mostly going to be talking about. The vast majority of things we see from the media about World War I is very likely just to be about the Western Front. The Eastern Front usually isn't covered in a lot of things. But to be fair, that's not even just a World War I thing. That's kind of a World War II thing as well. That's why I want to say one of my favorite historical events to learn about is World War II. Everyone's like, oh, normie. But I specifically really like the Eastern Front because we don't really get to see a whole lot of that, and it was just so insane. Innocent third world countries be like, we declare independence from all outside rule. Woo! Political assassin. Rigged elections. Yeah, wasn't a fun time being a third world country during a majority of the Cold War. Remember the terminology about first world, second world, third world, that really just comes down to definitions of the Cold War. People mistakenly think third world is an economic reference. Third world just refers to the countries that weren't aligned with the West and the US or the Soviets and the East. So this is why the CIA from the US and the KGB from the Soviets come to beat up third world nations, because they both want this country to join one of their sides. Whether it's through this or through this, whatever works, congratulations. You're being rescued. Please do not resist. Put yourself in the CIA's shoes. If you don't do it first, the KGB is going to do it anyways. Put yourself in the KGB shoes. If you don't do it first, the CIA is just gonna do it anyways. So many terrible things happen because of this way of thinking. It's kind of funny. Not saying it's not true. It's just like that's... Meanwhile, the British Secret Service be like, we should totally lace Hilter's food with estrogen to turn him feminine. I mean, is it the worst idea I've ever heard? No. It could have been fun. It could have at least been a little bit of trolling. Would that have affected his decision-making skills? Absolutely. Just a weird way to go about it. This was their actual plan, by the way. I mean, the British Secret Service without the blunt would have came up with this same poop. Makes you wonder what they put in the tea. As always, big thanks to my patrons. Month 2. In Drew's basement. Drew's Argentinian Grandpa.
DOOCHBAGGINS.
Boys. I can't
Connor
sleep.
Pavlik.
Kansas was mentioned.
Amateur Archaeology.
aPhatNarwhal.
Carmel
Fredrik Tibblin.
InquisitorXarius.
KingBearHaze.
KirinoIsBestGirl.
LuxembourgLover.
Mgmluthegoat.
Tyrol.
Tambre.
Mexican 760.
ZaneyBoi.
Like your name here. Check that link to Patreon down below.